Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and today we're talking about Justice League number 52. So I've been covering the Justice League issues because I just happen to really enjoy these, what I guess we're going to call filler arcs, that essentially bridge the gap between Scott Snyder's run on Justice League and Death Metal, which the next several issues of Justice League will be tied into. It even really kind of works with these story arcs, or at least the last two, where the Justice League was out in space trying to rule over an alien planet in the previous story arc, and then in this issue, they're on their way back home to Earth, and they ran into this creature called the Black Mercy from a previous Justice League story arc, I believe, and this issue is about them being trapped by the Black Mercy, which sort of feeds each of the heroes their desires and attempts to sort of trap them in a sort of perfect world while it eats away at their bodies in the real world. And that's what the book's all about, specifically focusing on Batman's experience in the Black Mercy and the Justice League's eventual escape, which is not a spoiler because we know they have to return to Earth for the events of Death Metal, but nevertheless, it's what's present in this storyline, and it was like so it again actually just like our last review of the Batman book is exactly what I expected, and was a very insular focus on Batman's character specifically, and both books were pretty decent. They were very predictable because of that, but this was a cool mix of vivid art featuring the Justice League trapped in this enormous enveloping plant thing where like flowers are growing out of Batman's mouth and stuff like that. It all looks pretty cool, and with Robson Rocha doing the penciling, Danielle Enriquez doing inks, Romula Ferrato Jr. Doing coloring, and Tom Napolitano doing lettering, it's a solid looking book. Jeff Loveness, who wrote the previous issue, finishes up this little two-part story arc, and he does a pretty good job at telling a story that's a mix of creepy imagery and a pretty solid take on Batman's character. It's all kind of about him like talking to his dead mother essentially in the form of Black Mercy through this hallucination, and Bruce is regressed to the form of a young boy for most of it, but it is a real thesis statement on Batman's character. They eventually escape at Wonder Woman's direction. I really don't feel like it's any major spoiler at this point, but Batman does kind of, I don't know, there's a certain admission of like that there could be this better world and this escape, but he's pulled out of it, and Batman's left wondering if there's like this future for him, and it shows him like working with villains to build a better world, growing old and happy, in a contrast to most of the futures we've seen with Batman, which they also showcase us, including a flash of Batman from Kingdom Come, and even what I can only believe is the Batman from Batman Beyond, or at least the Bruce Wayne from that time period. And it's an interesting exploration of Batman's future. And essentially, when he gets pulled out of the Black Mercy, he just watches alarmed as the rest of the Justice League takes this thing out. And he says nothing until they return to Earth, and Superman talks to him. And Kal-El says, "I had a son. The first time the Black Mercy touched me, it showed me Krypton that never exploded, and it showed him a family that he never had on his home world where he belonged. Like, like where he would like fit in amongst his people, as opposed to being this demigod." Johnny DC, thanks for joining us in stream. He says that he watched New Mutants today and it sucked. I haven't gotten around to that. I haven't been overly motivated, I guess. I still have to watch the new Bill and Ted movie, which I did rent and have to get around to watching. But they are showing New Mutants in my area, so I guess I can do that. Like I said, I have not been motivated. Anyway, Superman talks about what he saw the first time with the Black Mercy, but he explains that since then, he has a son now, and he has a family, and he found a life, and he explains to Batman, he's trying to say like we can change, we're allowed to change, we can want new things. That means we're still alive, which I think is a brilliant little statement on these characters and their potential future, and the idea of characters like Batman and Superman progressing with families or whatever that gives them a future. And then Superman says something interesting where he talks about, well, Batman asks him what the Black Mercy showed him this time, given that now Superman has a family. And Superman says it showed them the present day, like as it exists pre death metal. And I thought that was a nice little statement on Superman's character, too. It's really a book about Batman, but it's a very complete little two-part story that has a nice little sentiment about Bruce's character, Batman in general. It feels a little timeless in that anyone could just pick up the story and enjoy it without really needing to know much more than like the basics about Batman to really appreciate it. And if you love Batman, then you'll appreciate little cameo things like the references to Kingdom Come and Batman Beyond. So it's a pretty cool book on the whole. I would definitely recommend it and the previous issue. And that's basically for three in terms of these filler arcs. They're all pretty good and fun. And each, thanks again for joining us in chat, Artoria. Each of those story arcs kind of do their own thing. The Spectre one was an interesting but very classic Justice League story that I quite enjoyed. It felt like something right out of like pre-New 52 DC, and I just loved it for it. That Overlord story was different and interesting and genuinely politically coherent, like, and had a point to make on a deeper level beyond just its surface level content. And this Black Mercy story, while very short, was just an exploration of Batman's character and wasn't bad. An interesting little mix of horror and some pretty deep but well-written character stuff. Raphael, I was saying you're a little late and haven't kept up with Justice League. The cool thing is, like, as long as you correctly intuit what the story arcs are, and they're all pretty well labeled, all three are quite nicely standalone books. They're all pretty good stories. I guess they are filler, and I keep using that term because that's what they're called at this point. It's the only way to explain them. And they don't have like long-term significance for any of these characters or storylines overall, but they're just fun Justice League stories in and of themselves, and in some ways they're more valuable than something that's trying to make some grand statement about any of these characters. This is a good exploration of Batman's character, but it doesn't have anything truly new to say. I think it kind of does near the end. All that stuff about change, that's a good little statement for any DC book to make, and a good little thing for them to keep in mind going forward, that these characters are and should change and grow. I think it's a bit of a mistake not to do that, and we often stumble backwards, not just at DC, but at Marvel too. And even long-term indie stuff will sometimes suffer from stagnation if they don't change things up once in a while, or let their books sort of run their course. That's not really an option with Justice League, and I don't necessarily think that's a terrible thing, so long as we're trying new things like this. Horror has certainly been explored in Justice League before, but this was just a good job. They did a good job in it, in keeping this self-contained, fun, yet also pretty creepy at times, especially the previous issue. Johnny DC was saying, yeah, this book is pretty cool, and I think that's a good way of putting it. Pretty cool. Certainly not the coolest thing we've talked about this week, or the most interesting series in the world of comics right now, but these were really nice books, and as I've said quite a few times now, they're a nice break from these characters in particular, which are currently embroiled in storylines like Death Metal, Joker War, and all this other stuff. It's really nice to have something calm, self-contained, and just like these concrete, different experiences. If this is the model for what they want to do with Justice League after these Death Metal tie-ins that are coming up, that will be pretty interesting. But either way, we're going to talk about those Death Metal tie-ins, and I haven't yet really been given a solid reason to stop covering these Justice League books they're pretty interesting, and I'm enjoying talking about them. Anyways, I think that's enough for that one for now, because I still have so many books to talk about, including Wolverine next. We got some trouble with vampires to talk about, so stay tuned for that. We'll see how many I get in today. I'm kind of trying to get some out of the way, especially because I don't have a lot of big plans because I work pretty early tomorrow morning, so hopefully this will kind of all work together. Johnny DC is saying, is death metal another universe? No. Very explicitly, they had one of their tie-ins explain the bridge between the current events going on in DC and death metal. So basically, what we see in this most recent issue of Justice League, the Justice League is returning home, and then like the events surrounding Perpetua happen. She empowers the Batman Who Laughs, and he stages this massive invasion of Earth and is able to reshape the whole planet into the death metal universe, at which point the Batman Who Laughs and Perpetua like just unleash their power and change across the entire multiverse as we know it. Basically to stage a further sort of attack or like grounds for more action against the rest of reality, which both Perpetua and Batman Who Laughs have plans for, just distinct variations of it, now that the Batman Who Laughs has empowered himself to oblivion. It's kind of neat how they connected it. At first it was a little unclear because we've talked about this in previous Justice League books, and this is what I guess the continuity was, but I wasn't sure. These most recent Justice League books very firmly establish that, along with one of the Justice League tie-ins. The guidebook actually really nicely explains it all. And no problem, Johnny DC, for explaining that, because he said thanks in chat. Raphael was saying they should add Zatanna to the Justice League. They would be way more powerful. She's a fun character, and people have been talking about Alexandra, like Daddario, playing her in some form or another in a live-action piece. That would be cool as hell. Anyways, we'll be back at some point, hopefully today, to talk about Wolverine and maybe a couple more comics. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time here on Comic Island. Oh, and thanks for everyone specifically who joined me in chat. Raphael, Johnny DC, and Artoria. Always fun to hear from you guys.